Welcome to part 5, or part 6, part 5A if you like, of Accounting for the Visual. I'm just bumping my computer, mucking up the camera. Sorry for that. Starting on slide 30 for this part, we're talking about accounting, hegemony and emancipation. Images of accounting that show the ability to accounting to portray power and domination and submission of parts of society, but also in ways to show that use accounting to break free, to become a tool of freedom and liberation and emancipation. So I'm going to show a combination of images for that. We'll start off with the statue of the bull outside the New York Stock Exchange in Wall Street. And that statue is there as the symbolism of the financial markets, of a bull market being a rising market. What I think is interesting about this photo is that there's a fence around it, and it's got the tools of the state, the police, having to guard it, having to protect the signs of capitalism, the image of capitalism, from the people, from the community. There's some way that financial markets, of which accounting is an inherent part, need protection from the populace by the forces of the state, the police, by fences, by all the power mechanisms that are available to the state. And they're going to be protected from a bunch of protesters, which are not in this photo, but as part of the Occupy Wall Street movement. We are the 99% is the core, and what this is in relation to is who owns the wealth in America, where the top 1% or the richest 1% own about half the wealth of the United States, and the remaining 90% own about the other half. Now, the way we know who owns it is because accountants tell people. This is what accountants do. We tell people about income and wealth. And if it wasn't for accounting information, we wouldn't know this. So we are this tool that is allowing this oppressed part of society, or a part of society that believes they're oppressed, to know what is the problem and have them rail against what they perceive to be the problem, the financial markets being the expression of the domination of capitalism and the extreme wealthy. Now, Australia is not quite as bad as the United States in terms of its wealth distribution, but it's not great either. So here's one set of images that shows the role of accounting in society in terms of being a tool for capitalism and needing protection by the forces of the state from the masses. And we see this in a lot of our laws, that they're there to enforce property rights. And accounting is all about recording property rights. We record an asset as something we control, something over which we have property rights. So we are intricately linked into this. Now, the next image I'm going to show is from a cartoon, which is Uncle Scrooge from the Disney cartoons. And Uncle Scrooge sitting on his pile of money there. And Uncle Scrooge has an immense amount of power. And his power comes from his wealth, the ability to dominate. But these cartoons also show another story with their nephews, Huey, Louie and Dewey, doing things to subvert, to get around Uncle Scrooge's power. So here we have images of wealth, images of what accounting is. Tell us how much you work, by showing an image of his money rather than just a balance sheet. And portraying the power that comes with money. And it's this power that comes from money that accountants tell people about. We tell people who are the richest organisations, who are the richest people. This is all about accounting. Without that, they wouldn't be so obvious, and maybe their power wouldn't be so great. The next image is one I'm not quite sure what it means. Again, it's the bull, the symbol of the financial markets. And here we've got it tied up in red tape. Now, I'm not quite sure what this is telling us. It could be either that we need to regulate markets to stop the wild rampages of unbridled capitalism, and so are constraining the financial market bull by all this tape to keep it under control, or perhaps it's the other way around. Perhaps it's this red tape holding back the free movement of capital and the role of financial markets to allocate resources to maximise the wealth of society. So I said, I'm not sure what this means, but it is a symbol that can be interpreted either way, an image that can be interpreted either way. The last image is a bit over 100 years old, actually 150 years old, from the antebellum South of the United States, the period of the slave trade. And so some research done by Tom Tyson in particular and Dick Fleischman, who looked at the accounting records of the plantations in the antebellum South and the way that they used accounting to manage their slaves. In fact, slaves, along with the property itself, were the most important assets of the plantations in the Old South. And they kept very detailed accounting records and of how they were treating them, how they were maintaining them, treating them very much like the way we treat property, plant and equipment today. Now, this was just considered a normal part of accounting at the time, that you kept these records. That when we look back at it with 21st century sensibilities about slavery and say, how could accountants be involved in this evil trade? Well, it was normal. And we'll leave it up to the ethicists to question whether we should look back at 150 years ago with our 21st century sensibilities, or whether we should interpret it in terms of the time when slave trade was just a normal part of business activities in the United States South, and if we go back even earlier, through the north of the United States as well. The northern states also had slavery, but they had abolished it by the time of the Civil War in the 1860s. But Britain had had slavery, as had most European countries, and had abolished it during the 19th century. But when there was slavery, these were kept as assets, they were accounted for as assets. We accounted, maintain the records. So we are playing a part in this sort of oppression that could go on, even if we don't like to recognise our role in it. Now, I'm going to get even more distressing on the next slides. Just a series of images from the Holocaust. In the top left, I have the images of survivors of the Holocaust in their uniforms of the concentration camps. To its right is the gate of Auschwitz, Arbeit macht frei, which I believe means freedom through work. Bottom left is the corpses, and I can't remember which concentration camp this is when it's liberated, but just the images of all the corpses. And possibly the most famous of the victims of the Holocaust, Anne Frank, the Dutch schoolgirl made famous by her diaries and the movies about it, who died of disease in a concentration camp. Now, the reason I throw these up is that the way the Nazis managed these concentration camps and the treatment of the Jews and the Romani and homosexuals and any other person they deemed to be enemies of the state was through accounting. Is they had to move these people from Germany and other occupied lands to these camps, schedule the trains, track down who these people were, bring them together, and all of this was detailed accounting. In fact, this is some of the earliest computerized accounting that we know of. These records were managed using IBM, what we would call now precursors of computers. Our first sort of, one of the first uses of computerized accounting. In addition to managing the people and their movements to the concentration camps, these were also forced labour camps, slave labour camps, and had to do the accounting there for managing a manufacturing process, supply of raw materials, management of labour and overheads and all those sorts of things that management accountants do. Accountants were all involved in this. So for us to sit back and say, oh, accountants are just a neutral observer and recorder, of society. That's a lie. We are active players, and we played a part in one of the greatest crimes in humanity's history. Certainly the greatest crime of the 20th century. Accountants were a fundamental role of this crime. I'm going to leave it here. There's the following slides with the summaries and things like that, but I think this is a good point to finish because these images are so powerful, and it's only when we point out the role of accounting in them that we start to see it, because accounting is normally hidden. Its role is not visible here, but it is here, and we need to acknowledge it, and we need to own it, and we need to see what we can do to use accounting as a force for good in our society. That's the end of the semester of the lecture material. My consultation times leading up to the exam are on Moodle. David will be back soon. I'm not quite sure of his times. But in the meantime, Jasmine and I are both available for any questions people may have about the content matter of the unit. So, good night. Hopefully, I won't see you again because you will have passed the unit and graduated.